Drafting Archetypes is brought to you by Grey Viking Games. Check them out with our affiliate code link in the description.
Hi, this is Sam Black, and continuing my set review of Midnight Hunt with Blue. So, first up, Organ Hoarder. This is the common with the highest game in hand win rate. Its game in hand win rate is higher than a huge number of rares that are considered bombs or whatever. Part of this is that blue is just pretty good. You'll notice that there are a lot of cards with win percentages north of 60, but also this card is just great in the format. I will talk periodically about how because the removal is strong, you want the mana that you invest in creatures to be invested in external value rather than stats. And this is a great example of getting a lot of external value with your stats. Look like the strategic planning effect here of seeing 3 cards, putting one in your hand and the others in the graveyard, potentially gives you more than just 1 card plus selection, because you also get graveyard value in a set that has a lot of that. Yeah, I mean, this card's fantastic. It's very easy to justify taking it over basically any rare. I mean, not any rare where you might want to take it, you just can, because it puts you in blue, and blue is really strong, and it's great itself. Revenge of the Drowned. This is one that may surprise people because it is not hard removal, but the zombie is very nice, and it does get whatever you need to get. If you need to get a creature out of play, it will always do that. Instant speed, no questions asked removal is pretty good. This is that, even though you likely have to deal with their thing again. I've had some, this is also the kind of card that can end up functioning time walk-ish, and the zombie tokens are really good. There's just a lot of stuff to do with them. Flip the Switch. I just said the zombie tokens are good, and the fact that Flip the Switch has a win rate this high should really tell you how true that is. Counter anything unless your opponent plays 4 is really close to a hard counter for a lot of the game. And the fact that this is single blue rather than double blue compared to something like Cancel is a pretty big deal. This is a card that I think I rate slightly lower than its game in hand win rate would imply, just because some decks are better able to leave mana open for it than others. And you can see it's played much less than the cards around it, precisely because the counterspell fits well in some decks and not all decks. So, I think, if I were to make a static pick order for blue cards, I would recommend taking the Abomination over Flip the Switch by default, because it goes in more different decks. As you can see, Flip the Switch is generally taken much later than Abomination, but it's certainly worth noting that Flip the Switch, when it's played, certainly does well. Falcon Abomination. I am typically very down on Windrakes, but it requires very little additional value to turn a Windrake from bad to good. Windrake's usual problem is that they typically trade very slightly down, but if you get an object out of the deal, then it's very easy for it to trade very slightly up. Trading very slightly up instead of very slightly down is the difference between a good card and a bad card, or bad card and a good card, or whatever. Shipwreck Sifters. very high win rate, very low play rate. Play only in blue white, or in fluke decks where you end up with tons of things to discard to it. When you have it, you want to have multiples. They play really well together. I think that this card is pulling a lot of weight toward lifting blue-white as a color pair's win rate above other color pairs that are potentially more powerful. Like, I think black is a better color than white. If it is still the case that blue-white wins more than blue-black, I don't know if that's changed. I haven't checked the stats super recently. I think it would largely be because of sifters. If it's not the case, then it's as close as it is because of sifters. Like the fact that you get this like top tier common that you want multiples, that you can get multiples of because no one else wants it, is a really big deal. Bait Hook Angler. This is a card that has really overperformed. It's a good, no questions asked, easy sack outlet that does stuff very similar to what Lunarch Veteran is doing, except the body is a little bit different. The body trades up better, but doesn't give you as much value hanging out. It notably does have a lower win rate than Lunarch Veteran, despite being in a better color, but it's doing a lot of the same work and able to hold its own pretty well. It really sucks to have to trade off a card with this, which makes it really hard to attack into. So yeah, this one's overperformed for me. Startle. This one's interesting. I really like this kind, the blue often has this kind of combat trick where it's a creature gets less power and you draw a card, and anytime that can lead to you saving a creature, it's really good. But this card has the bonus mode of make a zombie draw a card, and I don't care about combat, which makes its buyout a lot better. So anytime you're playing a deck that is looking for more zombies to use for whatever, ideally not just to do damage, but to sacrifice for something, it's pretty painless to put this in your deck as a zombie source and then incidentally have access to it as a combat trick where it can be kind of a large blowout. Larder Zombie. People make fun of me every time I put this in my deck when I'm streaming. It has a very respectable, though not amazing, game in hand win rate. I find that it blocks reasonably well, and it's pretty good at just generating value over time. You never want to have to use a removal spell on it. And it does a pretty good Sigil Starfish or whatever impression. If the board stalls, you will outdraw your opponent with this, and that's worth something. I think this card's totally respectable. Consider. Consider's a really interesting card in this format. Opt is pretty good in general, and Consider is just better in a way that is very meaningful. Putting the card in your graveyard sometimes just straight up gives you value. Also, there is the blue-red spells deck where this is the perfect card because you're looking to cheaply trigger your I cast a spell, and I'm happy about it payoffs. There's a but here that I've kind of struggled to explain in the past, which has to do with your library composition density. Specifically, anytime you have self-mill effects, this isn't a valuable card to put in your graveyard. And so while this helps you put your other stuff in the graveyard, it makes your things that aren't it but want to put things in the graveyard weaker than if this were another card that wants to be put in the graveyard. So there's a delicate balance here if you're playing stuff like Organ Hoarder and like if you're the blue-green deck specifically that's playing like Eccentric Farmer and Organ Hoarder and maybe tapping or whatever, like tapping on the window or windowsill or whatever it is, window, whatever. Any sort of self-mill stuff, this like you might want to not play Consider just because it's not a creature, not a land, not a flashback spell. And if you're counting that stuff, it's like kind of messing up your count. Also, the format is just like pretty aggressive. And I think that there's so much value available to you incidentally from your creatures that spending mana to draw cards is a thing you get punished for. And while Consider only costs 1 mana, and it's pretty hard to get punished for that, it's still, this isn't a format where I want to be spending mana to like get cards, and Consider asks me to do that. So I'm like slightly lower on Consider than I feel like one would generally expect one should be. I don't know if the stats are agreeing with me or if the stats are saying it basically doesn't matter very much, but it always improves your deck. Because it does have an improvement when drawn, and I wouldn't expect it to have a super high game and hand win rate because it's not very, it's like, it's not going to swing a game. I suppose what this is saying is that I think the fact that it's drafted fairly late makes sense to me. It's not going to make or break any deck except for blue-red spells, so you shouldn't prioritize it, and you might want to not play it if you are playing a deck that has a lot of other self-mill. Gale Drifter. I like the value that this offers, but it is pretty clunky. It also competes for 4s with Organ Hoarder in color, and then obviously, as we saw with white, there's kind of a glut at 4, which can sort of choke it out. It's fine. It's nothing special. I'm not like super down on it the way that I'm often down on Snapping Drake type cards, but you also shouldn't take it very highly. Devious Cover-Up. I have found that trying to play control decks based around Devious Cover-Up does not feel like a winning strategy because that implies that you want a bunch of removal and then to like use your removal and grindiness to play a long game, and then you just like lose to your opponent's value creatures. That said, this has a pretty good game in hand win rate, which tells me that I'm probably just using it wrong when I try to do that. Most likely this is actually a card that's for the blue-green self-mill decks to like avoid decking yourself and get more use out of like your best cards that you mill, that kind of like turbo get you to the now I have a library that's very dense with good business. Jarnyard Amalgam. It's 5-mana creature that gives you some value up front, but not a lot of value up front. I consider it a playable 5, but not something that I'm ever going out of my way to get or put in my deck. It's like a replacement level or below replacement level 5-drop in a format where you don't want a lot of 5-drops. Unblinking Observer. I don't think this is very good. It's just like pretty low impact. It's like not very bad. It's a 2-drop, and sometimes blue decks need 2-drops, and it's not terribly difficult to spend the mana. Something to find the mana. Find something that you can spend the mana on at least once or twice, but I wouldn't prioritize this and generally try not to play it. Geistwave, this is one where I'm a little surprised about its stats being low. I think that this kind of effect is generally pretty good. I will say that it's somewhat a victim of the strength of removal in general. Like, if no one plays like giant werewolves that get totally wrecked if you bounce them, then this doesn't prey on them. Like, if your opponent's creatures are all value creatures, and you have this bounce spell that's trying to like get them out of play for a minute, you're going to be really sad about the value you're giving them. So it ends up being better to use on your own things than your opponent's things. And obviously, bouncing your own stuff for value is not as generically good as bouncing your opponent's stuff for value. Locked in the Cemetery, everything I've ever said about why aura-based removal is bad applies here. This format has like Geistwave and the common Cathar that sacks to kill enchantments, and a bunch of ways to sacrifice things for value, and various creatures that like have static abilities that just do stuff when the creature can't attack or block or untap or whatever. It's just not a good version of not a good effect. Stormrider Spirit, again, this is just a lot of mana for a rate creature. Flash is kind of nice, but too likely to just get killed for less mana. Secret's the Key. This costs an actual million mana to get card advantage out of. And there are just like way easier ways to get value. Component Collector. Really bad stats. I generally don't play it. I did play a game where I had it, and I didn't pay any attention to like when or whether I was triggering it, but then the like tapping and untapping that it did let me like win a race. So I don't know. It was fine for me once, but also it just doesn't do very much. 4 toughness is a pretty good number in this format. Like, it blocks well, but like a creature that blocks well in a format where blocking is pretty bad for a lot of different reasons relating to like evasion and going wide and siege zombies and stuff like that is just not really where you want to be. Otherworldly Gaze, it's card disadvantage that you spend mana for. Uncommons. Scab Wrangler is totally busted. You end up with a bunch of these like zombie tokens that don't want to do anything, and this lets you tap them to tap your opponent's creatures. Tapping your opponent's creatures is really strong. That's all. It's just good. Overwhelmed Archivist. This is apparently this is a discount organ grinder, or organ hoarder rather. It draws a card, like it loots on ETB rather than strategic planning on ETB, which is clearly quite a bit worse, but it costs 1 less mana and it has Disturb. Roughly the best thing, one of the best things you can do for 3 mana outside of rare in this format, which is definitely worth something. Also plays super well with the Sifter, because it gives you, like, Sifter triggers on any discard, and this is one of the few other ways to discard. Plus, this is the thing that's good to discard to Sifter. So really, really good way to like improve your Shipwreck Sifter decks. Phantom Carriage, it's a giant monster that dodges a good portion of the removal spells while generating value, so basically does everything you want to do. Giant monster is a problem, but giant monster is a problem. Like, by giant monster is a problem, what I mean is investing in stats is a problem, like I talked about, because it means that it like dies to everything. But the problem is that big werewolves die to everything. This thing, unlike big werewolves, often won't die to Olivia's Midnight Ambush, doesn't die to Silverbolt, doesn't die to Defenestrate, and then incidentally also doesn't die to Moonrager's Slash. So also it just rules the skies. Like, it's The biggest common flyer is a 3/4, which matches up very poorly against this 4/4. There's also like the black uncommon 3/4. This dominates all of it. Well positioned. Nebelgast Intruder. So this card's just great. It's really easy to ambush a creature for value with it. Plus, it's just a 2-mana 3-power flash flyer. On top of that, it plays really well with Flip the Switch, which, as we've already established, is a strong card. So having cards that make it easier to put it in your deck is very good. Really, just nothing I don't like about this card. Big win percent drop. By big, I mean, a little over percent. Fading Hope, just good rate bounce spell. Pretty straightforward. Covetous Castaway. The backside of this is really good. So if you can discard it to Shipwreck Sifters, you're really doing it. The front side is not very good, unless you really care about the mill 3. Basically, I've found that my opponents play this, and then they start desperately finding some way to try to trick me into killing it because they want to get the backside, and the 1/3 isn't doing anything. That said, I still think this is just generally pretty good. And then, it's extremely good if you have a way to put it in your graveyard, particularly Phantom Carriage, but also just any sort of discard or sacrifice effect. Delver of Secrets. So I think Delver is one of the best things you can be doing in blue-red. The problem is I think it's only good in certain narrow blue-black decks that I don't think are the best kind of blue-black decks, and blue-red, and I think blue-red isn't very good. So I think this ends up being a good card in a bad deck, and I can actually point really easily to stats that support that. We see that it has the same game in hand win rate as Covetous Castaway, but if you go over here to its game played win rate, the deck that it's in wins way less. Now, this creates a misleading effect where it has a huge improvement when drawn, which might make you think, oh, this is a good card, but it's less that Delver is better than Covetous Castaway. As you can see, they win the same amount, and more that the rest of the Delver deck is garbage. Therefore, the higher improvement when drawn here shouldn't be viewed as a pull to Delver. It should be viewed as a reason not to prioritize Delver, which is why drafting by improvement when drawn is kind of a trap. So pretty big meta lesson there on how to read the stats. Also about Delver. If you get there, it's good, but I think it's better to avoid because I just don't think that you're going to do well in your draft while you're playing blue-red, which is just an archetype I want to avoid. I want to avoid red, and then even if I do have to be red, I would prefer not to pair it with blue. Dissipate, it's fine. Its stats are below Flip the Switch, which isn't surprising to me. Obviously, exiling rather than countering is worth something, but requiring double blue is a pretty big deal, and then not getting the zombie. I think the zombie ends up being more valuable than the fact that Flip the Switch is theoretically a soft counter. Firmament Sage, I ranted about this thing when I was talking about the Dawn Guard, which is this but good. This is that but bad. It's bad. Mysterious Tome, really sweet card, would be good probably in some formats. Numbers make it clear that this isn't one of them, it's just too slow. Vivisection, kind of the same thing. The sacrifice a creature part is very cheap, but the spend 4 mana at sorcery speed to draw 3 cards part is not. This card asks you to take too much time off in a format where you really don't need this much card draw most of the time. Ominous Roost. Note, bad card in a bad deck. When people play this card, it has an improvement when drawn. Because they've drafted around this thing, which doesn't even offer a real payoff, and as a result, they've given themselves a disastrous deck. So I think you should avoid it. I'm being told that it has good stats in blue-white specifically. How good are we talking? Boost. It goes up to 60% in blue-white, which is impressive. And when you do that, it even has a high game played win percentage, which makes me think that people must. So it's 700 times in blue-white. How much overall? Okay, so like around 1,000 times people played it in not blue-white, and around 700 times people played it in blue-white. It did well when it was in blue-white, which means like that 1,000 times it must have been unbelievably bad, which is not surprising. It's really like I can't imagine trying to support it if you're not blue-white. So I guess what this is saying is there are probably some blue-red decks that try to play a whole bunch of flashback spells and get absolutely wrecked. Don't do that. But if you have a good blue-white deck that's using it a lot, you can do it there. All right, rares. Grafted Identity. Control Magic is a good card. This gives an extra +1/+1. It requires sacrificing a creature, but that's like almost trivial in this set. This is like so much better than it would be in like basically any other set. And its win rate reflects that. This is a legitimate bomb. Sludge Monster. Note that this somehow has a lower game in hand win rate than Organ Hoarder, but still probably in bomb territory. I'm going to be honest, I don't know exactly what this does offhand. 5 mana, 5/5. Okay. It's pretty good, but if it's not giving me some value, I'd be worried about it lining up poorly with removal spells. When it enters the battlefield, that's a great start. Or attacks, put a slime counter on a creature. All non-human creatures with slime counters on them lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 2/2. Sorry, non-horror creatures, not non-human creatures. So it makes things that are not horrors 2/2s with no abilities. So it ETB nerfs a creature. If you play it post-combat and their creature has already taken damage, it straight up kills the creature. Yeah, I mean, this is a monster that loses, that, you know, gives a utility that is sometimes undone when it's killed. So it makes sense to me that it's below Organ Hoarder, just because this is basically like a card that you get punished by remove. Like you're down if your opponent removes this most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time. Chat points out that you can slime your own zombies to remove Decayed, which is pretty sweet. Memory Deluge. This card does way better than Vivisection. It is a lot more powerful. Instant matters, a lot of card selection, flashbacks, not nothing. I do think that this card is like a lot worse than Organ Hoarder. Like I agree with what's going on with the stats there, but and so I mean like it's worth noting that blue stats overall are so high that this like 60% win rate here means that this is below like a lot of the blue common instance, which is believable to me. Again, I really don't think this format is very much about like spending mana to accumulate cards, but this is like, you know, a solid card. Malevolent Hermit. It's basically an upgraded version of the common. I don't know how upgraded it is, like somewhat obviously, but not wildly. But good non-bomb. Patrician Geist. I bet this thing has impressive stats in blue-white specifically. Up to 60% in blue-white. Down to 58 in not blue-white. Remember that means that it's lower than 58 in specifically not white blue decks. I think that you generally don't want to play it if you're not blue-white, but it's very good if you are blue-white. Triskaidekaphile. I have never seen this card in a draft. My opponents have never played it. So let's see. It's basically just a 2-mana 1/3 with 4-mana draw a card and then some meaningless extra words on it. That's fine blocker with like late game thing that can matter. But again, I think this format is not very rewarding of like spend mana to put cards in hand. Yeah, it's Azurmage. That's the card that this is very similar to. Yeah, like this Azurmage is just not an effect you're like particularly desperate for. Yeah, Curse of Surveillance, another card that would be good in some formats, but it is really just too slow here. You don't want to take turn 5 off to like start drawing cards slowly. Note that 17 lands is sorting cards that are one color on the front and a different color on the back as gold cards, even though they really aren't. So like the werewolf that loots, the unblockable werewolf, is not appearing under blue. I'm just going to talk about it later. It's really good. Spectral Adversary, really, really, really high game and hand win rate, better than all the commons, and that's actually saying something. I mean, 2/1 Flash Flyer for 2 is just a totally great floor, and then this can also like save a creature from a removal spell or remove a blocker or whatever. Yeah, just kind of plainly great all around. Also, the more mana you have, the more likely it is that this can just ambush and eat an attacker. So yeah, it's nice. Reading this one. Oh, okay. So this is the kind of card that mostly like, if you have a lot of mana, you can play it and immediately play something from your graveyard. That means that it's going to play really well with stuff like Eaten Alive that is cheap and high impact. And then obviously this can just like take over a game if it isn't killed super, super easily. So kind of in the like sludge monster space where sometimes, but not always, it gives you value up front, and then if you untap with it, it's dominant. Puppet Stitcher. Yeah, I mean, this is just a like good, like strong rare that is not a solid bomb. You can take top commons over it. Yeah. All right. Thanks. And if you are watching this on YouTube, if it ever makes it there, check the next video for the next color.